Hello and welcome to Miranda Made. As you can see out the window, it's rainy and dreary today, but I still wanted to make a video for this week. And I think instead of doing a sewing video, I wanted to just talk about some really important things. For this video, we're going to talk about how do you look at a sewing pattern envelope? What information is on that envelope? How do you choose a size? As well as how do you gauge the difficulty level of this particular or any particular sewing pattern? So those are just a few of the questions I want to answer today with this video. Let's get into it. So here I have a pattern from the 1960s, and I thought we could use this as an example of just looking at the envelope. What information is on the envelope? So first we can see the company. This one's made by Simplicity. Of course, we can see the original price. We can see the pattern number, and here is the size. That also has the bust measurement. So in order to choose a pattern, before you even go to the store or look up a pattern online, you need to know your own measurements. You need to have measured your bust, your waist, and your hips. But if you're doing a dress or a top, the bust and the waist is the most important. And that's going to tell you whether the pattern is going to fit you or not. Doesn't mean you can't buy it if it's too small or too large, but you will have more adjustments to make to the actual pattern. Okay, so that's how you start to choose a pattern, is you first have to know your sizes. So what else do we see on here? So on the front cover, there's not a lot of information. What we've already mentioned, and then we can see view 1 and view 2. So you have two different options of making this same pattern. You can make it with the 3/4 sleeves, you can make it with a short sleeves. Some patterns have more options than others. On the other side, we have additional information. We have some pictures here. These pictures on the back are particularly important because they're going to tell you and kind of show you how complex this pattern will be. This picture, along with how many pattern pieces there are, is going to tell you the level of difficulty. For example, look at these two patterns. So here, this one, you can see many different seams go into making this pattern. And look at all of the pattern pieces included. Whereas this pattern, there's not a lot of seams. There's far fewer pattern pieces that come with it. This is only 6 pieces compared to how many? 14 pieces. So this one is going to be more complex to make than this one, and it will take longer. So that's something that you can think about when you choose a pattern. Another thing to tell you how difficult it will be is if it says Jiffy, that means fast. It's going to be an easier pattern, faster to make. It says, oh, the dress only has 2 main pattern pieces. It's easy to cut, easy to sew. So that also gives you a clue. But sometimes it will say it's easy when in reality you go to make it and it's not that easy. Anyway, that can give you a clue too, after you know your size, how difficult the pattern is that you're choosing. So what other information do we have on the back besides these pictures and the pattern pieces? Well, we also have a description here, and we have suggested fabrics. So when you go to choose your fabric, you know what options will work with this pattern. For example, this one says you can have a cotton, or cotton blends, velveteen, cotton suede, linen, silk, synthetics, blends, textured cotton, silk, linen, shantung, crepe, looped mohair, wools, blends, flannel, double knits. So actually this pattern, you have quite a bit of option. You can even use some knits. Okay, after that, you look over here and here's our diagram. So according to the size, so this one is a size 16, it's going to tell you how much fabric you need if you want to do view dress 1 or view 2 for the dress. And this is the amount of yardage. So this one is a 16, which means if you need a 16, you're going to need this amount of yardage depending on how big the fabric is, how wide the fabric is. If it's very narrow, only 35 inches or 36 inches, you need a lot more than something quite big, like 60 inches. Same with view 2. And then we have the width of the lower edge of the dress here in inches. For the ribbon, how much yardage you need of that. You only need 1 yard, and how big the ribbon should be. If you do the view 2 with the braid trim, how many yards wide you need of that fabric. And the collar interfacing, how much you need of that. And then down here, they have your basic measurements. So if you need a 16, that means your bust is a 36, your waist is a 28, and your hips are a 38 or close around that size. And then last, we see the sewing notions, like the thread. What do you need thread-wise, zipper-wise, bias seam binding, and of course, OPT means optional. Now this layout is a little bit different than some other layouts, but all the information should be the same, even if it's in a slightly different location. And then we also have the year it was printed. So this is 1964. Sometimes the year is not printed, and that can be frustrating, but you can gauge it based on the fashion. Okay, so there's the basic information. Let's look at some different options here. So let's go back to this one. The layout is pretty much the same because these are from the 60s, and this one is too. But what about like a modern pattern? So here is a reproduction pattern, and it's a little bit different, though similar. So we still have the different views. You can choose A or B. This one tells you the style, so 1940s vintage. It says it's easy to sew. Is it really easy to sew though? Well, they don't show you all the pattern pieces on the back here. So that is one difference that maybe that comes with the modern patterns, but you can still see all of the seams that are going to go into it. So relatively easy to sew maybe, but definitely more challenging than a Jiffy dress, I would say. Okay, so on the front, we also have the company, and then we have multiple sizes. So modern patterns help a lot because you don't have to get each individual size. You have multiple sizes here as long as you get in the right range. On the back of the pattern, the sizes are on the flap, which is good and slash kind of bad because if this flap gets torn off, you're in trouble, which happens sometimes. So anyway, you have all the sizes here and the measurements, so that way you can gauge what size you're going to need. We also have the price. And then here we have fabrics, what kind of fabric you can use for the dress. Here we have the notions, what notions you're going to need. And then according to sizes, whichever dress style you want to make, the yardage you're going to need of each type of fabric. And then we also have some finished garment measurements. And then we have another language here. So you have some Spanish, you have some French to make it more globally usable. Okay, what about inside the envelope? Let's go back to the vintage envelope. Let's use the Jiffy dress. So you're gonna have instructions and pattern pieces, of course. Most of the time when you order online, the seller will have checked to make sure all the pieces are there. And they will tell you if they're not. But you still, before you start, you should check. If they're cut out, part of that's done for you. If they're not cut out, you have to cut them out. But apart from the pattern pieces themselves, you're going to have instructions, and the instructions are going to tell you several things as well. So you can see again more pictures of what it's going to look like. You have some general directions, like, reading the instructions, stay stitching, seam allowance, that kind of general information. And then how to use your pattern, some information here, a list of the pattern pieces, and then you have different layouts for cutting. They include these layouts so you can save fabric and not waste any. So you just need to find the view that you're wanting to make and then go with the size. So for example, if I'm making view 1 and I'm going to be making a medium large with a 35-inch, 36-inch fabric, this is how I'm going to lay it out. If it's a bigger fabric size, then I can lay it out like this. Okay, and then they also have some tips on marking your fabric, which you can use as well. Then on the reverse side is all the specific instructions. So here we have step by step how to actually put it together and finish it. And this one only has one piece of paper because it's a jiffy dress, there's fewer steps. Whereas if you have a more complicated pattern, you're gonna have a lot more steps. For example, in this other pattern here, where you have so many pieces, you're gonna have a lot more steps to put it together than the jiffy dress. What about modern patterns? So one major difference with modern patterns, besides the multiple language, is so usually you can buy them not cut out, right? You don't have to buy them used, but you can. And you have multiple sizes, and then in the instructions, it's going to be a little bit different. So here they have all the pattern pieces, they have general directions, they have some specific cutting and special notes. They also have layout, though it looks a little bit different font. Still, it's essentially got the same information. But the main difference is if you look at the actual pattern pieces themselves. Because the actual pattern pieces will have finished measurements on modern patterns, and those are not in vintage patterns. At least I have never seen them. They're not included. So this can help you kind of gauge really how big it's going to be when it's finished. Whereas ease is just kind of worked in on the older patterns. You don't really need to figure that out. So here we have total ease above body measurements is approximately 5 inches. So you're breathing, you're moving. And this in general, you don't want to mess with. But if you're like a really experienced seamstress and you want a tighter fit, I guess you could mess with it. For the most part, I would say avoid messing with the ease because it's built in for a reason. And in my experience, when I tried to take out the ease, I regretted it. I took it out, and what happened? I couldn't move my arms. So don't mess with that too much. Unless your fabric is very, very stretchy, then you do have some more leeway. But if it's a cotton, don't mess with the ease. You will regret it. All right, you made it to the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching. Your participation in this channel makes everything worthwhile. So every time you hit that like button, every time you leave a comment, makes the world of difference. And of course, if you're new here, just subscribing makes a difference for this channel. So thank you so much to those of you who have become regular viewers. I really appreciate that. I hope you liked this video. I hope it was informative for you, and I will see you next time.